So on behalf of GIDS Institute of Development Studies, our Board of Governors, my faculty colleagues, some are there online, some are joining physically. And on my own behalf, I welcome you all for this monthly Golden Jubilee Lecture Series of GIDS Institute of Development Studies. We are going to have the 8th lecture today. So we started this series last year, August. So we'll be concluding in August, September with a 2 to 3 days big conference. This is our celebration of completion of 50 years. So I'm happy to say that we had all big personalities who have given lecture in the past, which includes Professor Saibal Kar from CSSS Calcutta, Professor Seema Batla from JNU, Professor A.J. Joseph, Director of GIDS, Kerala, Professor Arup Mitra, who was with IEG and now with South Asian University, Dr. Arjunan Subramanian from Glasgow University, Professor Satish Chandra, he joined us from Indonesia. He gave the 6th lecture and the last 7th lecture was by Professor Achin Chakrabarti, again from Kerala. So we are having today the 8th lecture in the series, which mostly the previous lectures were, except one, mostly related to economic scheme. Today we are having the lecture on emerging trends in India's foreign policy. So although I'm not the expert of this field, my area is economics and agriculture economics. My colleague Dr. Senapati is from international relations. So I'm thankful to him for arranging this lecture, the speaker as well as the chair. So before we start the lecture, I just introduce the chair and then the discussant and the speaker. As you all know, we have already circulated the brief about the chair and speaker and discussant. Also, abstract was circulated. So probably you know the basic theme of today's lecture. So it is my humble job to just introduce the chair. Although he is very well known, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey is the professor at the Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU, New Delhi. He served as the chairperson of the center and the director of Russian and Central Asian Area Studies program. He teaches courses on politics and society as well as foreign policy of Russia and the Central Asian states. He was LM Sirbi Visiting Fellow at the Center of South Asian Studies, University of Cambridge, Charles Wallace Trust Visiting Fellow, University of Cambridge, and Visiting Fellow at Cambridge Central Asian Forum, Cambridge. He was International Observer for Parliamentary Elections in Uzbekistan in 2014 and Presidential Election of Uzbekistan in 2007, 16, and 2021. His area of interest is Indian politics, especially in the eastern Uttar Pradesh. He has very widely published. I will not go into the details of publications, but we have circulated the details are there. He has written a number of books and a series of papers in international and national journals. He is a multifarious personality, well known in the area of international relations. So I welcome you, Professor Pandey, Sanjay Kumar Pandey, for chairing this today's lecture. And thanks for readily agreeing to chair the lecture. Also, we have Jajati K. Patnaik, the discussant of today's lecture. He also hails from JNU only. I also did my PhD from CSRD in '96. So And my colleague Senapati is also from International Relations JNU. So it's our family function like lecture today. We have majority of our colleagues from JNU. So Jajati ji teaches at the Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Earlier, he served as a visiting scholar at the Gulf Studies Program, School of International Studies, JNU, and associate at the he was also associated with the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, the well-known Institute of Advanced Studies. Dr. Patnaik has been conferred with the Outstanding Teachers Award by the Governor of Arunachal Pradesh at the conference hall of the State Legislature Assembly in application of his immense contribution to the overall development and growth of higher education in the state. He has been acting as a referee for acclaimed journals like Economic and Political Weekly, SAYS, Routledge, and other international publications. He has published numerous articles in edited books, journals, magazines, weeklies, and dailies nationally and internationally. He has also presented many papers at national and international conferences and delivered lectures at several academic institutions. He is a regular contributor to the leading dailies on foreign policy and geostrategic issues. His area of interest include West Asia, comparative politics, connectivity, geopolitics, geoeconomics, and border studies. So we will have his comments, and we are looking forward to Patnaik ji to listen to you. Lastly, introducing briefly Professor Manish, today's speaker. Mr. Manish is Professor and Dean, School of International Studies, Central University of Gujarat, Gandhinagar. Manish ji, my wife was there in Gandhinagar in Kendriya Vidyalaya for almost 5 years, so I have stayed there quite a long time. And I've seen this Central University taking shape. It was during 2009 to 2014. So I had been to your campus as well.
Right.
Manish ji also background from JNU.
Oh, you are also from JNU. Okay.
He's
So
trained at JNU.
Today is a JNU specific lecture. He has earlier served as Associate Fellow with the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis and an Officer of Special Duty at the Government of India during 2005 to 12. From March 2012 until October 2017, he was Head Department of International Relations, Sikkim University, Gangtok. So he has served various places. He also holds various honorary positions, advisory board member, Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Policy Research and International Studies at the Mahatma Shaji Rao University of Baroda, visiting faculty, Naval War College, Goa, member Board of Studies of the School of Foreign Affairs, Language and Political Economy, Rashtriya Raksha University, Gujarat, member Board of Studies, Department of Political Science at Maharaja Shaji Rao University, Baroda, member Board Studies, Parul University, Vadodara, member Board of Studies at the Sardar Patel University, Vidyanagar, Anand, member Board of Studies at the Central University of Punjab, to mention a few. I think the list is very long. He has been on the selected panel of various universities in India as well. Manish ji is a MA, MPhil and PhD from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His areas of interest include foreign policy and strategic security aspects. He is the co-author of the book titled Jihadis in Jammu and Kashmir, a portrait gallery, published from SAYS, and he has edited a volume titled as The Belt and the Road Initiative Implication for India. So very popular theme, both the books. I'm sure that today's lecture on India's foreign policy and its challenges is going to be very motivational, and I'm very much excited to listen to foreign trade, our foreign policy, which is, I think, I have a lot of interest, although it is not my core theme, and I see the number of people joined online. So we have many listeners here, and I don't want to come between the speaker and all the dignitaries who are offline and online. So I now hand over the dais to Sanjay ji to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, Sanjay ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, first. Very good afternoon to all of you. And Professor Pramod Kumar, I'm honored that I'm part of your program. I have known Manish for a very, very long time. Chittaranjan Senapati and Jayati Patnaik have also been known to me for a very long time. They all are from the same university, same school. So, as you very rightly said, Pramodji, we all are. It's basically JNU alumni functions in which we have very distinguished guests and listeners, of course. Well, the topic that you are covering is very significant. Uh, India's foreign policy, especially in the last one decade, uh, has come to focus globally and within the country also. The government which came into power about 10 years back. Incidentally, 2014 was a very important year internationally. It was the year when the Crimean War took place, and subsequently, after 8 years, we have the Ukraine War, the beginnings of which can be traced back to the annexation of Crimea in February, March 2014. Since then, uh, the international politics and relations among and between great powers has taken new dimension and shape. And India also, the year was notable because a new government came into power and has adopted a very proactive foreign policy in which we see certain elements of continuity, but also we see many changes. I'm very sure Professor Manish will touch upon both. He will touch upon not just the continuity and change in foreign policy of India, but hopefully also, since he is an IR person, the global context and how it has influenced Indian foreign policy and in what ways Indian foreign policy have made a mark in the global arena, on the global stage. I welcome all the listeners and I welcome Manish and Jayati. Professor Manish, over to you.
Thank you, sir. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And in fact, indeed, it's a privilege to be delivering this lecture on India's foreign policy. Honorable Director, Giri Institute, uh, Professor Sanjay Pandeyji, who is the chair of this session, Dr. Jajati Patnaik Dr. Chittaranjan Senapati, distinguished guests. I think it's a great honor for me to speak on this very important subject, which has to do with India's foreign policy. And we all know foreign policy has always been a subject of considerable interest to a common man, and also now to the students at large. Most of the Indian universities now have a School of International Studies, departments of international studies, wherein foreign policy is one of the core subjects which is being taught. So I can easily assume that there is a lot of interest in India's foreign policy. Political parties also, now that we are, say, uh, going to witness the elections, and most of the political parties have come up with their electoral manifestos. I think foreign policy prominently figures in their manifesto, which means there is a lot of interest in India's foreign policy, and therefore for academics like us, it becomes very, very important to critically examine the directions, the contours of India's foreign policy. I think the foreign policy of a country, when we talk about it, cannot be completely divorced from its domestic politics and governance. The influence and the outcome, and each actually impact each other. We have seen this during the freedom movement. The thoughts and ideas of the founding fathers indeed heavily influenced the foreign policy of independent India. Indeed, let me slightly take you back, shaped by the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi's Ahimsa and Satyagraha. And also the reverberations of what you can say the struggle against colonialism. Non-alignment, disarmament became one of the core principles of India's foreign policy at that point of time. Civilizational India also, when we talk about, could not have been expected to be a camp follower. We followed a policy of non-alignment. We supported movements against colonialism, racism, apartheid. India became one of the important champions of what we can say a non-discriminatory, non-proliferation regime. And it also chose a chart of what you can say, rather an independent course, completely positioned itself outside of any post-war alliances. So that's how we started way back in 1947. But I think there is a global context now which has changed. The world has significantly changed, as we can see from the early days of the last century. The Cold War is no more now. The disintegration of Soviet Union, the successor Russian Federation also has struggled to hold its own amongst the power, and I think Russia today under President Vladimir Putin is slowly regaining a lot of influence. So the Euro-Atlantic dimension of global developments has now shifted eastward towards what you can say the Asia-Pacific, and the more recent phase is rather the Indo-Pacific regions. So the 21st century, as we debate and discuss, will belong to Asia, it will belong to Africa, it will belong to Indo-Pacific regions. And in all these intersects, whether be Asia, Africa, or Indo-Pacific, in all these intersects, I believe that India can and it should rather play a very, very important role. So we are now in a second debate of the 21st century, right? Therefore, the international order as we envisage is no longer the two blocks, right? China becomes very, very important now. That also does not mean that US is a declining power. US continues to play an important role. But what we also see is the emergence of new threats. What are these threats? Terrorism, extremism. These are the new type of threats which are emerging now. And we need to keep a sort of a close eye on these developments. We should also respond appropriately to the evolving situation, and challenges will always be there, but we should also understand that they throw up new sort of opportunities for all of us. Within this larger systemic context, how should we be defining India's foreign policy goals? I've tried to list out a few of them. it's just not a exhaustive list, but a tentative list. But some key goals are securing and protecting your borders, preserving unity and territorial integrity, providing a sort of a uninterrupted economic growth, which should be aimed at poverty alleviation and eradication. Then the third, I would say, promotion of trade. Energy security, the fourth most important goal, tapping up domestically unavailable minerals. Minerals are going to be very, very important, and particularly when it comes to rare earths. Afghanistan becomes, just to give you an example, Afghanistan becomes important for the Chinese primarily because it has rich deposits of rare earth, which are actually important for the future global growth. Exploring outer space, science, technology, including, I would say, information and cyber technologies. Then, obviously, promoting defense security cooperation with the like-minded countries and participating in the joint efforts aimed at combating international terrorism, cyber terrorism, piracy, drug running, organized crimes, and the most important thing, which is one of the key objectives, the policy goals, is to forge, to enhance people-to-people contact through what we all very commonly say, the use of soft power. So we can imagine now that the conduct of foreign policy through a series of concentric circles or rising pillars, wherein you have the immediate circles or pillars as our neighbors, right? Then you have the extended, the ASEAN countries, Far East, which can come under the ambit of what we can say, uh, uh, what we can say, the Act East. Am I audible? Or I think the video has frozen. It looks like.
You are audible.
Am I visible as well?
Yeah, you're just stand still.
Your video is still.
Let me just very quickly try to fix this.
Yeah, please.
Now it is okay.
Right. So, as I said, the Act East policy, as well as the countries of the Gulf, West Asia, which I was discussing, the extended neighborhood. Then, what also becomes important is our relations with the permanent five, the P5 of the UN Security Council, also should gain centrality. Then there are three key players in our diplomatic engagement. One is the Russian Federation, China, USA. Then obviously regions like Europe, Africa, and Latin America cover the remainder of the geographical tour, rather. So I'll come one by one. So starting from the first, which is India and its neighborhood. And when we look at India, India's relations with its seven SAARC members, I think by and large, barring exceptions like Pakistan, it has been relatively good. There were initial hiccups with India-Afghanistan relations, but subsequently we picked up. More recently, with the emergence of Taliban, I think there are again certain challenges which lie ahead. But I think India has currently not given any legitimacy to the Taliban regime as such, but is trying to engage in some capacity with the Taliban at large. As I said, India has been participating in multilateral discussions on Afghanistan. It's expressed its disappointment at being excluded initially from the Russia-China-Pakistan trilateral meeting. But subsequently, it was invited for discussions in Moscow. India has expressed its reservations on the inclusion of Taliban in any form of a governing structure by emphasizing that there is no good or bad Taliban. This is the model which we have completely rejected. The situation, as I say, in Afghanistan is complicated, and Pakistan's policy also is aimed at undermining the initially the elected government and now closely working with the Taliban regime. So Afghanistan situation is a bit tricky, but I think the challenge lies ahead for India is to how to best engage the Taliban. Our relations with Bhutan are excellent. Let me slightly take you back to 2014, the swearing in ceremony of the first swearing in ceremony of Prime Minister Modi when he invited the head of the states or the governments for the swearing in ceremony. And if you remember, the first foreign visit of Prime Minister Modi was from Bhutan, followed by Nepal, giving a sort of a signal that neighborhood does matter, and asymmetrically, the smallest state in the neighborhood matters the most, which is Bhutan. He subsequently made his visits to Nepal, followed by Sri Lanka. That's how all these tours, foreign tours, were planned. Relations with Bangladesh again have been restored to complete normalcy in a sense that India and Bangladesh have signed uh, and settled their land maritime boundaries. Uh, uh, when you have Sheikh Hasina government, you must have seen that there is a sort of a regime compatibility between India and Bhutan. India and Bangladesh. Uh, and I think with Hasina's government, the most significant contribution of this government has been to clamping down on Pakistan aided and abetted terrorism, which was active in India through Bangladesh. So I think that is one of the major success stories, apart from the land boundary agreement, the water sharing, and so on and so forth. The relations with Nepal, as I said, also do indicate a semblance of normalcy. The government in Kathmandu does need to address some of the concerns uh, which actually are the concerns of the Madhesis. Uh, so that is one aspect. There is again a major concern, which is the Chinese presence, and that I'll come subsequently at a later stage as to how China is trying to encircle India's neighborhood. Uh, but but I'm sure Nepal also is aware of the importance of good neighborly relations with India, and the dependency factor also, which cannot be compensated by its over proximity to China. With Sri Lanka, also relations are by and large positive. India is extensively associated in the redevelopment process in the north and the east of Sri Lanka. Uh, you will see that when it comes to relations with Sri Lanka, they resonate to some extent on the state of play within the state of Tamil Nadu. And one of the major irritants has been the fishermen's issue. The issue of Kachativu also crops up in discussions when it comes to Tamil Nadu's politics. We must have seen very recently that this issue also came up in some discussion. Then there are areas of political and economic concern in India's relations with Maldives. There are political difficulties in Maldives. The interest of Maldives in attracting greater Chinese and Saudi investment in developing its sort of infrastructure needs some sort of a monitoring at our end as well. But what should be the most concerning thing when it comes to our relations with Maldives is the increasing Wahhabi influence and the number of Maldivians being attracted towards ISIS, which I think we need to carefully watch. At the same time, Maldives also is aware that in an emergency like situation, they will have to turn towards India. So I think that basic sense of awareness is there. Pakistan, as I said, uh, always has been a challenge for India since 1947. It has continued to face a sort of an identity crisis of a sort of a very existential nature right from the days of partition. And this is one serious issue which has complicated by the internal dynamics wherein power in Pakistan actually vests with the army. Uh, Pakistan feels that it can overcome its internal contradictions by continuing its war of attrition with India. But I think, but I think there is now more sense which is now prevailing. Uh, India is also not currently engaging in any sort of a dialogue with Pakistan. It is also very regrettable that Pakistan has unleashed a sort of a Frankenstein monster of terror. But I think Pakistan again now is turning out to be victim of its own Frankensteins which it had created. Uh, so we also have seen in the past that there have been efforts on the part of India to normalize relations with Pakistan. Indeed, all the governments in New Delhi, whether be it the I.K. Gujral government, whether be it the P.V. Narasimha Rao government, whether be it Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, all governments, and indeed Prime Minister Modi also tried to normalize relations with Pakistan, right? In one form or the other. We can take the case of Lahore Plus diplomacy, Agra summit, uh, Prime Minister Modi making an unscheduled visit to Pakistan. But I think there are certain structural issues which uh, I touched upon at the beginning, which actually impede any better relations at this point of time between India and Pakistan. Uh, and I think this is one of the major reasons for SARC's inability also to consolidate itself and move forward as other regional groupings have done. The role of Pakistan in undermining a sort of a greater engagement between countries in South Asia uh, cannot be, and this is driven by its antipathy towards India. So broadly, and within the SARC also, since SARC has not been able to push itself, the sub-regional initiatives like the BIMSTEC, the BBIN have actually taken precedence over a sort of regional initiatives. So broadly, when we look at the neighborhood, this is a situation. The Chinese influence in South Asia also seem to be growing. And this is going to be one of the major challenges. Now, when we come now to, let's discuss a bit of China. Now, with China, India's relations are more complex. China's strength and power today is on a cusp. Uh, if we go back historically, India's relations with China need to be based on the principles of good neighborliness. However, the absence of relationship based on trust uh, uh, has has to be noted. There seems to be a deliberate attempt by China to frame a sort of ignorance when it comes to India's core national interests. I touched upon South Asia and China. I think there is a growing nexus between China. We have seen a sort of a military collaboration between China and Pakistan, but more recently, as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, China wants to expand its influence in South Asia. The China Pakistan economic corridor, as we see, passes through the Pak occupied Kashmir. That's one. But more importantly, China is now wanting to extend this CPEC into Afghanistan. So this is, and I think there are indications on the part of Taliban that they are also working towards this. So this makes this region much more complicated, wherein China has access to Afghanistan. So does Pakistan has access to its minerals. I think this is going to further complicate the geopolitics of this region. But more importantly, when we see, when we look at Chinese investments, uh, not only that China's investments are rapidly growing in India as well, uh, Ch- uh, the China-Pakistan economic corridor I touched upon. China and India both are members of BRICS. They are both members of SCO. Uh, uh, and also India is also one of the founding members of what we say the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. Despite that, I think there are core geopolitical contestations between India and China, which we cannot be completely ignoring. China's expansion, as I say, into the Indian Ocean, and also the development of strategic bases and ports, Djibouti, Gwadar, the increase of defense budgets, its aggressive posturing into South China Sea, over the sea lanes. I think these are going to further complicate. Indeed, China has complained against the Indian exploration activities when it comes to Vietnamese waters. And obviously, India has responded to it, but I think China's assertiveness in the waters, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, also is further likely to complicate. And to a certain extent, this is one of the major propelling factors for the rise of the idea of Indo-Pacific. Uh, Now, the second important leg of India's foreign policy is its Act East policy. The, the earlier Look East policy dimension was transformed into Act East. If you remember the second swearing in ceremony, wherein Prime Minister Modi had invited head of the states from various ASEAN countries as well. But please understand, Act East is not just the change of nomenclature from Look East. The nature of the policy also has expanded. It has expanded geographically, indeed, culture, commerce, connectivity. If you remember Prime Minister's trips in his second tenure, starting from Mongolia to South Korea to Japan, uh, actually explains how geographically the Act East has expanded. But more so, it has also broadened its scope to include not just the economic aspects, but also the defense, military, and also non traditional aspects of it, of foreign policy. Now, ASEAN, again, which is a group, is India's today fourth largest trading partner. Uh, uh, and ASEAN and its six dialogue partners, which include India, Japan, China, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, are also currently discussing. Actually, they discussed what you call the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, though India subsequently backed out of it. So, Act East, which continues to be one of the important pillars of India's foreign policy, then connect Central Asia and think West. The countries in the region of Gulf and West Asia form a very integral part of India's Think West agenda, I would say. And this region is collectively India's largest trading partners with bilateral trade touching roughly around US 125 to 150 billion dollars, right? This is slightly an old figure, but I think you can just get a trend. But this region is very, very important when we keep uh, the energy security as central to India's foreign policy. The Gulf, as I say, is also the home of over 8 million Indian nationals, and their remittances actually are very, very important for the development. And therefore, anything which happens, any form of a conflict, as we are recently witnessing, could be detrimental to India's interest also in the region. For India, partnership with Iran has a considerable strategic significance. Iran plays an important role in energy security. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action between Iran and the concerned parties in 2015 uh, has removed an important hurdle in the consolidation of its relations with Iran. Then relations with Israel also are singularly important, wherein defense and security relations are of paramount significance. And I think Prime Minister Narendra Modi, uh, no wonder, made various visits to Israel also during his tenure. Now, when it comes to major powers, the big powers, the US, I think the India US partnership again has added impetus to what you can say the India US strategic dialogue. Now it's the India US strategic and the commercial dialogue. US, along with India, is part of the larger Indo Pacific architecture. Defense and security relations have undergone a sort of a radical transformation, with India now being a major defense partner of USA. Both countries have institutionalized extensive discussions and exchange of information in the areas of counterterrorism, cybersecurity, anti-piracy, drugs, and organized crimes. Now, we can we can say that India-US defense cooperation, which also includes service-to-service exchange, is very, very extensive. Both countries actually hold joint exercises in a number of areas. Uh, and Prime Minister Modi has enjoyed a very, very cordial relationship with various presidents, right from President Obama to President Trump to the current president, right? So we see that there is some robustness when it comes to India-US relations as well. But at the same time, India has always kept an eye on the course and the content of any movement between US and Pakistan and US and China. So this is something which also we need to understand. With Russia, I think uh, India's most important partner from an economic and security perspective, the former Soviet Union, and now the Russian Federation. There have been ups and downs, but India has by and large maintained good relations. Indeed, after the sanctions, Russia Ukraine, India has continued to buy oil from Russia also, uh, which also means that India does not want to leave Russia and come closer to China strategically. So that's also one of the points which is strategically important. Russia's indeed increasing embrace of China has actually figured in a lot of political commentaries, media commentaries. But these developments have been viewed with some concern here. But I think the big question, which I think we need to understand, is Russia working with these countries on issue which could impact India's interest? I think the answer is no. So by and large, our relations with Russia has been good. The European Union again is an important trade and investment partner, but more importantly, now India's focus is more towards Africa. Relations with the continent are geographically close and historic. Uh, we have believed in the common struggle against colonialism and apartheid, and this has indeed brought these two continents closer. India's interactions with Africa are at three levels: through one, at say multilaterally through African Union, regionally through what you can say the 8 regional economic communities, and obviously bilaterally also. Uh, Now, how do we now try to sum up? And obviously, I did not touch upon too much on the permanent membership of United Nations Security Council, G20, so on and so forth. But they are also very, very important when engagements when it comes to India's engagements with these multilateral institutions. To slightly sum up now, how do we now view foreign policy? India's foreign policy standing, I would say, is now reaching what I can say a unprecedented heights, establishing a sort of a steadfast and a confident pair in what I foresee as sort of a new global order. India's foreign policy has amplified its validity as a contender for what you can say the seat for a UN Security Council. The foreign policy in the last few years, right, has evolved through various I would not say stages, but rather the key elements. And the first is we witness a more pragmatic foreign policy. When I say pragmatic, the turn of the 21st century marked a distinct change. This is a, a departure from a sort of a more idealist policy, the Nehruvian foreign policy, which we witness. Foreign scholars keep saying that India is pushing a policy of multi-alignment and so on. But I would say India's foreign policy is more based on pragmatism. India has evolved to take a pragmatic stance when it comes to economic and security interests. India has asserted its independent stance in global politics, and it has refused to sway by any sort of external pressures. The best example I can give is India's position on the Ukraine conflict, on China's Belt and Road Initiative, and also when it comes to the membership of Quad. So I think these are certain indicators. The second important thing which we have witnessed in the recent past is we are transcending domestic concerns. Right? What do I mean? This government's approach has been that a domestic interests, the India's external strategic interests should actually be in close sync with India's domestic concerns. I think this is one very important element of foreign policy. We witnessed how G20 also became a part of a larger domestic debates. In fact, multiple verticals, right from University Connect to Youth Connect to Parliament Connect, we witnessed a sort of a domestic debate when it came to a subject like G20, which is predominantly a foreign policy issue as well. The third thing which is turning out to be very important is India is now becoming the voice of global south. It has become a key advocate for global south, articulating the concerns and aspirations of developing nations at the international stage. India's leaderships in forums like BRICS, G20, and a sort of a active engagement in United Nations on very, very important issues like the climate change, development, peacekeeping, and so on. I think it's here that South-South cooperation uh, is underscores the commitment of sharing developmental solutions with what you can say the southern economies. The fourth important thing aspect which comes out clearly is the developmental partnerships. And India has established itself as a credible development partner, particularly in the global south, delivering tangible outcomes on ground. Economic collaboration, I would not go into detail. Then contribution to global issues. When I say global issues like health, climate change, disaster management, vaccine Maitri initiative, the country's leadership when it comes to International Solar Alliance, the coalition on the disaster resilient infrastructure. All this illustrates that India is turning out to be a contributor to global issues. Then I think the most important thing which we have witnessed is the protection of Indian nationals abroad. India has shown its commitment to protect its citizens abroad, especially during crisis. The country has undertaken numerous operations in ensuring the safety and return uh, 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 of nationals which were stranded due to conflicts or even during the pandemic. So I think when we discuss India's foreign policy, today India's transformation into a more assertive player on international stage indeed signifies a shift from a non-aligned reactive approach to a more proactive and a strategic one. I think by leveraging its economic prowess, geostrategic position, and diplomatic acumen, India is shaping its relations with other nations based on its core interest and values. I think this is pragmatic yet assertive foreign policy approach holds promise for a brighter future for India, which would establish it as a dominant force in a very complex chessboard of what I would say the global politics. I'll stop here and I'll be very happy to take questions on this. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you. Sir, I think you are muted.
Yeah. Muted, sir, muted.
Sir, we can't hear you. Can't hear you, sir.
पंडित पंडित जी अनम्यूट कीजिए. There's some problem in your computer.
It's taking. But you are audible. You restart.
Sanjay, are you there?
Restart.
Log in again. मार्गरेट साहब किस यूनिवर्सिटी का वाइस चांसलर है जी? मार्गरेट Vice Chancellor. Please. तो रहे हैं कुछ.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't know. Sometimes technology is beyond control and beyond comprehension also. But thank you, Professor Manish, for a very comprehensive presentation in which you basically covered the entire gamut of India's foreign policy, starting from our non-aligned policy, a policy where we emphasized solidarity with countries of Asia and Africa, the newly decolonized countries, the start of the non-aligned movement in policy, and subsequently how from there we have moved to a more proactive foreign policy from non-alignment to multi-alignment, and where we have been able to make our presence felt in various global and regional fora and on various issues. You also very rightly said that while our primary focus has been our immediate neighborhood, the countries of South Asia, we also adopted a policy of extended neighborhood, and which we followed Act East policy and then Connect Central Asia policy with West Asian countries also, Think West, and new initiatives have been taken. But beyond our extended neighborhood, we have also been able to balance our relations with various global players, the P5 countries. Many a times the relationships have faced ups and downs, and there are complexities involved, but India's nuanced policy has been largely a success in dealing with our immediate neighbors as well as the other global players. Thank you once again for a very comprehensive and illuminating presentation. We will start by inviting the main commentator or discussant, Dr. Jajati Patnaik, after which we will have an open discussion. Dr. Jajati, maybe 10 minutes should be fine for you, 10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's okay, 15 minutes.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Esteemed Pramod Kumar, the Director of the GIDS Institute of Development Studies, Lucknow, and Chairperson of this lecture series, Professor Sanjay Kumar Pandey, Professor Manish Kumar, and Professor Senapati from the GIDS Institute of Development Studies. Of course, my duty is to sum up the discussion while listening to Professor Manish's eloquent speech, particularly in the context of India's foreign policy. I would like to say that he has briefly explained how the international power structure that transformed from Euro-Atlantic zone to Indo-Pacific zone in the different contours in a complex geopolitics. And particularly, he thrust upon the Cold War politics, the Nehruvian paradigm, what we call political romanticism, was replaced by neoliberal paradigm of realistic assessment in the post-Cold War period when Narasimha Rao, in the political structure of India, and in that context, how this neoliberal paradigm shaped the initial geopolitical and geoeconomic equations in the region, further, under the political dispensation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, how it stimulated and augmented India's position in the global sphere, much to the satisfaction of the Indian public. In the initial part of his lecture, he delineated in detail India's Southeast Asia policy, and he has brought to the fore the convergences and divergences in this Indian subcontinent, particularly related to the neighborhood. And he explained how, at the present moment, Maldives is being radicalized. So, which, on the other hand, just opposed to this, he highlighted how Bangladesh is clamping down on all these radical forces, much to the satisfaction of the Indian government. Moreover, he brought to the fore how China, through BRI project, that is Belt and Road Initiative, it's expanding its geostrategic reach, not only up to Pakistan's Gwadar port, but up to Afghanistan and Djibouti as well. And that is an alarming position for all of us. Touching upon India's Arctic policy, Professor Manish made a detailed discussion regarding India's ASEAN policy and how ASEAN emerged as the fourth largest trading partner of India. I had the opportunity to visit some of the border areas of India, Myanmar, Bhutan, all those bordering countries. No doubt, the Kaladan project, Thawang Trasigang corridor, Stilwell corridor, Asian highway, India-Myanmar Thailand corridor, that would be the great assets and inputs for strengthening our geo-economic and geocultural relations with the ASEAN countries. He also highlighted regarding RCCP, Regional Comprehensive Partnership, but India has also joined Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. That is very crucial for all of us to strengthen our relationship in the Pacific region. Coming to West Asia, Professor Manish highlighted how West Asia is an extended neighborhood and is vital for Indians. Discussing some of the issues on West Asia. Now, India is trying to strengthen its relations with West Asia through IMEC corridor, that is India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. As you know that, through this corridor, India, particularly the ports of India, Mumbai, and other ports like the Western Indian ports can be connected to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Fujairah, Jubilee, and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Haifa port in Israel, and Piraeus port in Greece, and further to Europe. There's a transnational multimodal corridor, which is linking India with Middle East and Europe. That's a great breakthrough so far as India's Middle East or the West Asia policy is concerned. In the eastern side, if you look at it, India is trying to exploring possibilities and harnessing an interest through Chabahar, through INSTC, that's International North-South Corridor, through the ports of Bandar Anjali and port of Astrakhan to Russia. This is another corridor. So in this context, India is trying to have a very comprehensive geo-economic corridor with the entire West Asian region. And as he rightly pointed it out, that the 8 million diaspora is great asset so far as the remittance is concerned. But to the utter surprise, I'll say that India has followed its own strategic autonomy in its foreign policy. We are not bound by any pillar of the foreign policy like Palestine and Israel. We have dehyphenated our foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine. So these are all very important inputs so far as foreign policy is concerned. Then coming to the other parts, particularly as Professor Manish said regarding United America and Russia. Yes, we have strategic autonomy because US is a strategic partner. And equally, we have developed relationship with Russia as well. In spite of the sanctions made by the United America and the NATO, we are importing 30% of the energy resources from Russia, and even that too in rupee. So the de-dollarization is becoming an important input in the international transaction, and rupeeization is becoming an alternative paradigm. So the international transaction is concerned. And Africa is concerned. Professor Manish has delved deep into the issues confronting the energy resource African countries, be it Sub-Saharan Africa, be it Eastern Africa, be it West Africa. They're all endowed with natural resources, the critical minerals. That is the reason China through BRI is heavily present in Djibouti, Kenya, Congo, in different parts of this African continent to exploit the raw materials, much to the exploitation of the local African tribes. And India is an alternative developmental model for the Africans. I had a meeting with Sudanian. He categorically stated that we need Indian presence because Indian democratic traditions, great cultural heritage, India's strong diaspora that are present in the different eastern parts of Africa are really great assets for us, not the Chinese. We need your support. So in case of Africa, be it African Union, be it Organization of Arab League, India has strong strategic interest in the region. Lastly, as Professor Manish discussed about the cultural aspect, the soft power aspect, the Joseph Nice concept of soft power, why and how Indian soft power is very critical and it's very important for the rest of the world. Our Ayurveda is unparalleled in the Indian Indic knowledge system. Our yoga, the International Yoga Day, the 10th Yoga Day, which is celebrated on 21st June. You see, this is the great achievement for the soft power is concerned. Our Bollywood is great asset. Our cuisine is a great asset. And mostly the Maitri diplomacy of vaccine. India is the largest producer of vaccines in the world today. So the point is that, as Professor Manish rightly pointed out, that these soft power resources are very important. And India is in a very strong position, the great diaspora. The British Prime Minister say today, this is the American Vice President, Kamala Harris. If you find Suriname, if you find Fiji, if you find Mauritius, if you find Trinidad, Tobago, most of these countries are being led, or the political dispensations are being led by Indians, Indian origin population. That's great. That shows that India is a civilization state. It is in a civilizational mission to achieve the great strides in the desert. India today is the 5th largest market in the world today, with 3.7 trillion economy, and is poised to be the 3rd largest economy in the world with 5 trillion economy soon. So the point is that there is need for our great civilization, great demography, our great demographic dividend. Out of 140 crore population, 50% of the Youngistan, the negative population you find in Japan, you find in Russia, you find in Ukraine. Now India will fill up this great demographic gap in the different parts of the world. So the demographic dividend, our democratic traditions, our geostrategic location, our culture, the civilizational culture, our great connectivity, the ports of Supara, Arikamedu, they're all connected with the Byblos port and the Romanian ports and the rest of the Ardenian ports in the world. We have to revisit this all connectivity corridors. We are doing it at the present moment through Mangalore Special Economic Zone, through Mumbai Special Economic Zone, the Chennai Special Economic Zone, the Kalinga Economic Zone, and Bengal Economic Zone. that are being connected to the different parts of the world, be it ASEAN, be it SCO, be it GCC. So as Manish said, that India is really fit to be the leader of the global world, the global south, be it climate change, be it International Solar Energy Agency, because we are poised to actually give 500 gigawatt of energy supply in the world today. And since most of the countries are situated in the topic of Capricorn and Cancer, we are in the best position to lead this global solar energy world order. And in case of the internationalization and the globalization and the democratization of the institutions, I think India is playing a very stronger role in the days ahead. So let us work towards a strong, vibrant, and proactive policy in the days ahead. We think not the politicians, but the academicians, the foreign policy think tanks, the civil society. We have to strongly contribute to make India great in the days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jajati, for a very spirited commentary. And while largely agreeing with what Professor Manish has said, you added certain points which perhaps were not adequately highlighted, though they were mentioned. So you talked about how the Indian policy has shifted from Euro, or rather the global polity has shifted from Euro-Atlantic to Indo-Pacific basin. You also emphasize the role of soft power and how our culture, yoga, has contributed a lot. You also mentioned how increasingly India is able to bypass, in a way, the US dollar as a global currency, especially in trading with Russia, a trade which for nearly 20 years hovered around 8-10 billion, but which in the last 2 years has crossed 50 billion mark per year. So you very correctly talked about it, and how pragmatic considerations have marked Indian foreign policy. You also mentioned India's role as the leader of the global south. Well, in that respect, we see more of continuity. The first Asian Relations Conference was held even before independence in 1947, and then there was Afro-Asian Conference in Bandung in 1955. So it's a long tradition. India has rightly continued with that. But of course, there is a big difference between the earlier emphasis on Afro-Asian solidarity, which was defined and seen more in terms of anti-Westernism, because most of these countries were newly decolonized countries. So an element of anti-Westernism was inherent. Of course, the current discourse on global south does not really emphasizes any anti-Western policy or worldview. So that's a change. You also talked about India's move from Nehruvian romanticism to a more pragmatic foreign policy. Professor Manish also talked about it. Of course, I would say that while largely correct, this is more complex and nuanced. Non-alignment at that point in time was also a pragmatic choice for India, as Nehru very rightly said. And again, this was before India's independence. As the head of the transitional government, he declared the first clear-cut enunciation of non-alignment when he said, and this was September 1946, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a month later, he said, as far as possible, we would like to keep away from power politics of blocs aligned against each other, which have led to great wars in the past and which may lead to greater catastrophe in future. So keeping away from power politics in a bipolar world, and also one of the once when Nehru was asked whether non-alignment was more of an ideal or idealist policy, he said, far from it. In any case, Nehru was rather non alignment was criticized both by Americans. John Foster Dulles' famous statement that this is fence sitting, inability to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad, ethical and unethical. And the Russians, rather the Soviets under Stalin, calling India a running dog of British imperialism, all right, clinging to the apron strings of their former colonial masters. In reply to that, Nehru said that non alignment is a very pragmatic policy. We don't want to get involved in power politics of blocks. We would rather want to cooperate and collaborate with both the blocks for the internal development of India, the backward country that we had inherited. So there was an element of pragmatism. And similarly, in the current policy also, although the foreign minister, especially talking about the Ukraine war, talked about how Indian foreign policy is dictated by or guided by our national interest and pragmatism. But nevertheless, we also talk about high ideals, and Prime Minister Modi is known for that. So I would take a more nuanced stand when it comes to idealism versus pragmatism, while I largely agree with Professor Manish and Dr. Jajati. I would rather not continue with my comments. I open the floor for questions and comments. Comments have to be very sharp, and questions too. Please do not take much time. If it is a comment, less than 2 minutes. If it is a question, 1 minute. Thank you. The floor is open. Please, students or any of our esteemed colleagues.
Let's have
Yes.
Let's have online if this question from the online.
Please. You can send your question, either written question or in the chat box, or else you can identify yourself and then ask the question. I'll check the chat box. There is no question as of now.
There was one question, I think, on the chat.
All right. And on Indian foreign policy, very enriching. My question is, what is your view? What, in your view, is future of India and Maldives relations? If time permits, what ideally should be India's stand on Iran's attack on Israel? We'll be grateful. Please, Dr. Manish.
Yes, I think on the first question, on the second question, rather first, I don't think the Iran thing is going to escalate further. I think my own understanding is that this particular issue, because there was a sense in Iran that some messaging has to be done. And I think that message has been sent. There are India's interest which needs to be protected. But I think there are discussions with Iran as there are sailors on the ship. Obviously, they need to be rescued, and I'm sure they will be rescued because some negotiations must be on. I think these are all closed room discussions which happen. But I'm sure that's one major and immediate Indian interest which India would certainly try to protect. But my own understanding is that this is not going to escalate further. That's point number one. Point number two on Maldives. I think it's always better uh, when it comes to Maldives, that there has to be, indeed, there is a model which is available, India Bangladesh, right? To the extent that we have a regime compatibility with Bangladesh, I think our relations with Bangladesh are always good when there is Awami League. I think this is a model which can work in case of Maldives as well. The current challenge which we are witnessing in our relationship with Maldives is precisely because there is a government in power which also does not have a domestic support. Nonetheless, it's more of a pro Chinese government. So I think this is for the people of Maldives to work upon. But as long as you have regime compatibility between India and Maldives, I think relations will continue to remain good. This is my assessment. There is a bit of radicalization which is happening, which actually concerns all the countries in South Asia. And this is something, again, which Maldives will have to address. There were at point of time reports that there are Lashkar modules also coming up in Maldives. But as I said, this is more to do with the domestic affairs of Maldives, not to do with the bilateral. But I think India will need to wait and watch on how things in Maldives are evolving. So that's what I think. But I think this particular regime is not going to be much of a challenge. In any case, there is a lot of dependence, Maldives dependence on India. So obviously they will come back. These are some hiccups here and there, but that's my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you.
This was question from Dr. or Miss Purnima Roy. Now, next question. You can type your question, or maybe also you can ask orally, verbally. प्रशांत जी, आप कोई सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं?
हेलो सर,
मैंने कहा आप में से कोई, yes, please identify yourself and please.
my name is Dr. Ramdas. I am consultant in GIDS. Sir, my question is how CAA affects the relations with our neighboring countries?
Manish, tricky question.
Does it affect?
How does it affect CAA, our relations with neighboring countries, especially Bangladesh?
I think we are making too much of CAA. The Bangladeshis themselves have never raised this issue, I guess, at a bilateral level.
Just as Kachativu might have been raised because of some electoral reasons.
No, but I did mention
Kacha. You mentioned. Yes, I heard you say.
The Tamil Nadu politics, rather.
But it was more of a domestic audience that the speakers were addressing.
Yes.
The issues have not been raised with our neighbors. CAA also, I mean, many of the things are not yet clear. How it will be implemented and what will happen to NRC, what will be the connect between CAA and NRC. We have to wait till the elections, and maybe only after elections we will have greater clarity about these very complex issues. But your question was very relevant, although it's a bit complex. Next question, please.
Okay. Let me put across some comments and questions both. I think Dejati and Manish ji both have they have pointed out India's foreign policy right from the time of independence, and rightly so. We have been successfully having our relation initially with the Soviet group, where in the 60s and 70s, when we needed very badly, we got Soviet Sangh along with us in defeating whatever situation in 1971 or 65 and 62, all those wars presented. Later on, post liberalization, we have become more closer to US and our strategic relation has been growing, as Manish ji said. And it looks like India is the alternate force with China for these countries, and when the world is dividing into multipolar, so India's important strategic position also plays a very big role. We being very close neighbor of China, but in the long run, if we see, it looks like there is a US on the one hand, Russia on the other part, and the third force is China. And China is emerging very fast, probably looking for replacing these two global forces. So it looks like India is very close to US, also very close to Russia. But when it comes to our strategic relationship, we can see a small case of Canada. India could not get the support of US for whatever reason. And US, can we rely completely on the US because they have very peculiar behavior. We had seen in 71 how India was almost, if we would not have got the support from Soviets, probably Pakistan would have won the war. And keeping India integrity was itself on question. Now, India is very close to Russia. Of course, we are having buying oil from them despite all US pressure and everything. But again, if we see Russia closer to China, if there is a conflict with China and India, can we assume the similar kind of support from Russia, or we should look forward to US in such a situation? Because China and India in a war-like situation, our economy is not as big as China is 5 times, and their defense and other, we cannot match in that respect also. This is the first aspect. Second aspect, India, with the relation of India with smaller countries in the neighborhood, say Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal, Myanmar. I think it's very tricky question how to keep smaller countries, especially the country like Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal. You can, I think last 40, 50 years we have been feeding Nepal. Their food security was completely dependent on India. For small benefit, they can move overnight to China. We have seen in the case of Sri Lanka, we have seen in the case of Nepal, now we are seeing this in Maldives. So the smaller country, although they blame India as a big brother, but being a younger brother, they take advantage threatening India, just getting closer to China. So in the long run, on the one hand, dealing with Russia and USA, how India should place closer to Russia or closer to US, and on the other hand, how to deal with these smaller countries, which are very, very tricky. There is a slight change in politics. Their entire foreign relations, their economic relations, everything will change. They move from one dimension to the other dimension. So if you could, three of you could highlight how India should look at in future dealing both these situations. Thank you very much.
Although I feel, Pramodji, your questions will take another lecture to answer, but still, Manish, please.
No, I think when it comes to India and
Just
its neighborhood, we all need to understand that there is a sort of a structural asymmetry in the region between India and its neighbors, right? So I think this is a dilemma which India will have to live with. I mean, there are no easy answers to it. I can give you the example when Gujral was the prime minister, he came up with this whole idea of Gujral doctrine, the principle of non reciprocity. Give your smaller neighbors more and take less. Did it work? It worked with virtually all neighbors minus Pakistan. But it did not work in an overall SARC context. Right. Bajpayee ji, when it came to Pakistan, right, come out of nuclear opacity and engage Pakistan in a larger arms control measure. So Pokhran 1998 was followed by Lahore bus diplomacy, right? But this also failed. So I think please understand that in a structurally asymmetrical relationship between two countries, I think smaller countries also have their own power to bargain, right? And this is what Nepal or Bangladesh or Maldives are actually trying to do with you. The challenge here is how uh, how can you best craft your diplomacy and foreign policy so that you can engage with your neighbors as well, right? At the same time, do not offend them and also ward off the external influences within what you consider your region of sphere, right? So this is what Indian the challenge for Indian diplomacy is. What India currently is doing, and I'll give you one very simple clue. India is now trying to come out of its uh, regional opacity, right? Means coming out of the region. That does not mean that it's trying to disengage its neighbor, but it's largely engaging with powers in its extended neighborhood, in the larger Indo-Pacific theater, in the maritime domain. Because gradually India has realized that this South Asian fixation is not going to help it grow as a regional or even a global power. So I think gradually India is trying to engage with its neighbors, but parallelly it's also trying to engage outside the neighborhood. And I think this is one of the best policy formulations at this point of time. This is what I believe. Uh, Also protecting its core national security interest, its territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. So this possibly could be my.
I will add to what Manish has said. First thing is that any of the big countries, they have very complicated relations with their smaller neighbors. This is true about India. This is true about Russia, what we are seeing in Russia, Ukraine, or Russia, Georgia. This is also true about US and many of its smaller neighbors, Mexico, Cuba,
Cuba.
countries in Latin America. So this is partly true about all big countries and their neighbors. Secondly, Pramodji, you mentioned about how in the past India's relations with the US were complicated. US was at times hostile, at other times unreliable, and you mentioned how Soviet Union was steadfast friend when it came to various resolutions in UN Security Council on Kashmir or other issues. But let me remind you, Soviet Union was not just that. It played a very key and critical role in our industrial development 1956 onwards, whether you talk about Bhilai, Bokaro, the steel plants, or you talk about Bhel, or you talk about oil exploration in Digboy, and the list goes on. So Soviet Union was the country which came and supported India's industrialization in a big way, although it did not gain as much, perhaps. And part of the reason why India's relations with West were not so cordial was the fact that they were not so forthcoming. So that is one fact. Regarding US reliability, well, in the current Iran Israel conflict, you must have read how the US has, while condemning Iranian actions and while expressing support for Israel's defense, at the same time, it said that it is not a party to any offensive action by Israel against Iran. So we have been doing similar balancing in our relations between Russia and US. Manish and Jajati have very clearly shown. Also, in the Palestine and Israel conflict, while coming out with unstinted, unequivocal support for Israel during the first few days of the attack, after the attack, Hamas attack. Subsequently, we moderated our position and expressed our long held support for two-nation solution to the Palestine problem. So such nuances and diplomatic maneuvers we have done, others are also doing. But nevertheless, your question was very valid and it brought out many other facets of Indian foreign policy. Manish, who
Yes.
next? और कौन है? पूछिए.
We have a big expert of international relations here, Senapati ji.
Yes.
Actually, my questions already covered, but actually, my turn is to thank you all of you. But before that, if anybody going to
that will come
ask
in the
some
end.
question, because I am very thankful because all this audience and participants, they have enlightened with this lecture in 1.5 hour, because we are ignorant for that. So any other questions maybe?
बोलिए भाई, कोई स्टूडेंट्स में पूछे, कोई हिंदी हिंदुस्तानी भी चलेगी.
Animesh, Prashant or anybody? कोई हिंदी में बोलना चाहता है तो बोल सकते हैं.
अवश्य, स्वागत है. If there are no other questions, with the permission of Professor Pramod, may I now request Dr. Chittaranjan Senapati to propose a vote of thanks. And on my own behalf, I thank Professor Manish. We keep meeting. We have known each other for more than 3 decades, 3.5 decades. I have known Chittaranjan also for a similar time, maybe 2.5 decades. Jajati and I have also been, we both started our career in India's northeast in Arunachal. And from there, I moved to JNU some 23 years back, and Jajati later. So I'm very happy that I got a chance to once again connect and interact with my old friends and colleagues. And I'm extremely thankful to Giri Institute, to Professor Pramod, and to Dr. Chittaranjan for giving all three of us a chance and opportunity to connect with you. Dr. Chittaranjan Senapati, or maybe if Manish or Jajati want to have a last word, 1 or 2 sentences, thanking or anything. Jajati,
Thank you, sir.
Manish.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, it was a pleasure. Rather, it came as a surprise to me as well, because I didn't expect that you are going to chair this session. It came to me at a very later stage. But as you very rightly pointed out, I mean, we know each other for now over 3 decades. I have known Jajati also. I was in Sikkim University with the IR department, and Professor Jajati also made a visit to Sikkim when I was there. So I think it was very nice. And I think with Giri Institute, Dr. Chitranjan and the director, Mr. Professor Pramod, I think thank you very much for this great opportunity which you have offered me today to deliver this lecture. So a big thank you from the core of my heart to all of you. Thank you.
We also thank the Vice Chancellor, Dr. V.N. Magare. I wish he had intervened or maybe made some observations or comments. But over to you, Chitranjan. And maybe Jajati, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And actually, first I would like to say Manish and myself were very close friends. We are staying in the same hostel, Brahmaputra Hostel. And later I went to Arunachal and he joined in the ministry, then IDSA. So we have been sharing our academic collaboration, experience, everything for quite a long time. Sanjay Bhai is senior to me. We are staying in the hostel and we know each other for pretty long time. And Chitaranjan is my brother, and we are staying the same floor in Central Asian Studies, Russian Studies at that time, and I was in West Asian Studies. Really, I enjoyed the discussion. That kind of intellectual engagement, it was really very much, you can say, intellectually thought-provoking. The kind of contours and the inputs we derived, I think we can translate into action in future, because we academia, unless we get together and explore the opportunity, nobody can do it. So I thank Professor and the head of the Giri Institute of Development Studies for giving me this great opportunity, because I am in Delhi, but in spite of that, he gave me an opportunity to speak at Lucknow. I also thank my friend Chitranjan again, because he called me at with short notice and immediately agreed, because I know he's my brother. So immediately agreed. So I enjoyed. It's really nice engagement. Hats off to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima ji, for initiating the Q&A session, for asking the first question, and subsequently all the others who participated in the discussion. Thank you very much. Chitranjan, it's your turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before Chitranjan comes in, let me thank three of you. It was very, I think, knowledgeable and very rich with contents, and on the foreign policy. This is second or third lecture we are having here, and we have here all the 3-4 streams of social science. We have economics, political science, sociology, geography, anthropology, all faculty, and we had PhD program. We are going to start our program soon, and this series is the 8th lecture which we are having. And for everybody's information, I would also require Professor Manish a manuscript, because we are thinking that we will be publishing this series after we have end of the year. We have 12, 13, maybe 15 lectures. We'll bring out a publication from some very good publisher like Routledge or Springer or OUP. So thank you very much, Manish ji, Sanjay and Jajati ji, for taking out time and giving your precious time for this chairing, discussant and the speaker. And also thanks to all the audience. I would expect the manuscript some 2-3 months time period is there, Manish ji. Look forward. Thank you very much. Now formal vote of thanks from Senapati ji.
Actually, before thanking all of you, already the session of giving thanks also run in this session. Session. And I'm very much thankful to all of you, that means the chair of this session and the speaker, as well as the discussion. Actually, you have enlightened us about this foreign policy. Since I have joined here, somehow I am off touch about this foreign policy, because I am working on development study, and also somehow some international development also I am touching in. But in that, in that sense, I am very much thankful to you that you have given the trends of foreign policy as well as the importance of India in the world. That we have got. Thank you, sir. Professor Manish, you are very eloquently explained the foreign policy and its play. I am also very thankful to you that when I have invited you for this lecture, you have agreed without any hitches and all these things. But even the second time also, because first time we have that cancelled the lecture because of some director's health problem, and also some problems were there. Still, you are supporting us, and you have supported and also joined this session. Thank you, sir. And Professor Jajat Patnaik, actually, you have given the trends of the fund policy in somehow elaborate way, and also whatever lacuna was there in the first lecture, you have justified it, and also you have given some more insights upon it. Thank you, sir. And also you have agreed when I have requested you. And Professor S.K. Pandey, actually, he is my teacher, and also he was there in he is there in Russian studies, Russian Central Asia, where I have got PhD. And he, when I called him in short time, he was agreed. There was even, he was saying that okay, if it is 15, it's okay. It is 16, that is also okay for me. So in that sense, I am very I am appreciating your spirit, and also that you have all this love and affections to us. Thank you, sir. And the audience, and after that I will like to thank my director, the GIDS Institute of Development Study, that he has facilitated, not only facilitated, even he is actively participated in this lecture series, and also this lecture particularly. And he has also on his curiosity, he has also asked some questions, and in spite of his economic background, he is also interested to have interaction in international politics and fund policy. Thank you, sir. And you have facilitated us very generously. And the audience, as well as audience in offline and online, they have also supported us, because they have joined, and also we are able to conduct this deliberation. And my institute supporting staff, as well as FIA's technical support team, they have also helped us. Thank you very much. In future also, we can meet in different series of this lecture. Thank you, sir. All of you, one and all. Thank you.
We meet again in May with a new lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.